Let's talk about one of the biggest pressures pastors feel every single week: preaching. Preaching is a pressure cooker. You know the drill, right? You spend hours studying, praying, crafting your outline. And then by Sunday afternoon, you're wondering, did it even matter? Just because you're preaching doesn't mean anyone is changing. And if you're not careful, that pressure can crush you. Most of us, as a preacher myself, step on stage carrying assumptions. Unfortunately, a lot of us are carrying false assumptions. We imagine that the room is filled with people who are eager to listen, that they're going to be taking notes, that nodding along, ready to rewrite their lives on the spot. I got to tell you, I don't think that audience exists. Instead, you know what you're preaching to, right? You're preaching to a mix of skeptics and seekers and half distracted parents and a lot of faithful folks, but they've just forgotten last week's sermon anyway. When our assumptions don't match reality, the weight gets heavier, and then we start blaming ourselves for a lack of transformation. We question our calling, and the pressure of preaching goes from kind of motivating pressure to a suffocating pressure. So the way forward, well, it's not necessarily a more polished or better outline. The way forward is actually adjusting our assumptions. When you preach to the real room instead of the imaginary one that we've created through our false assumptions, the pressure begins to lift and your sermons begin to connect in a new and fresh way. Well, let me give you 6 assumptions that are the right assumptions that can change everything about how you write content, how you communicate content, and how you feel about it when Sunday's over. So 6 assumptions. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context for each. Okay, here's the first assumption. Assume skeptics are in the room. A lot of you know I worked with North Point Ministries for a long time. I was a lead pastor for 13 years, and 11 of those were as a campus pastor, as a location pastor of Woodstock City Church. So I got to work for and with Andy Stanley and some other just phenomenal leaders, guys like Jeff Henderson, Joel Thomas, Clay Scroggins. Just some great, great, great people. One of the phrases that we came up with and used a lot is assume they're in the room. For us, I want to add skeptics to it because I think we can assume that believers are in the room, but there are probably people in your church on a Sunday morning that are curious. They're skeptical. They're kind of seeking something that they don't have yet. And I think we have to remember that they're there. We have to assume skeptics are in the room. So again, not everyone believes what you and I believe. Some people are curious. Some are resistant. Some maybe were bribed with lunch. I don't know why they're there, but if you preach only to the convinced, you're going to miss the unconvinced that are sitting 3 rows back. Clarity and compassion, that really keeps the door open for these people. So, an assumption you should take into every single Sunday: assume skeptics are going to be joining you today. All right, number 2, assume that people don't really want to change. Okay. A lot of discipleship, maybe all of discipleship, is about change. It's about the renewing of our mind, right? This idea that we are changing, shaping our life after Jesus. The problem, though, is that we all like being comfortable. And following Jesus requires some very uncomfortable things like surrender. Okay, surrender is very uncomfortable. And when you begin to expect resistance because your assumptions are right, you begin to preach in a way that makes the cost clear, right? You don't want to water that down, but you also focus too on the reward, that it's worth it. Like Jesus never hid the cost of discipleship, and we shouldn't either. At the same time, Jesus always pointed people to the kingdom, pointed people to something bigger like hope. So when we understand that people are going to resist change, they're not going to want to lose what's comfortable, we can acknowledge that. We can even say that out loud in our sermons. I realize this may be uncomfortable, but following Jesus was never meant to be comfortable. It comes with a cost. It allows us to teach in such a better way, acknowledging what people are feeling. All right, here's the third thing. The third assumption: assume that people are not going to pay attention the whole time. Assume they're going to tune out at some point. I mean, And it isn't because of you. I mean, a phone's going to buzz, a kid is going to squirm, a mind is just going to wonder, right? Like your sermon isn't competing with other churches, but it is competing with a lot of other things like TikTok and attention spans and the kid beside you or the kid behind you that isn't even your kid. And man, they're crying, and the guest services team hasn't asked them very politely to step out into your kid-friendly space, overflow space, right? I mean, you can't assume attention. You have to earn it. Stories, great questions, illustrations, modulation of your pace. Those aren't like fillers. Those are strategic survival mechanisms for preachers. You should incorporate some of these things into your message because it will help people not tune out. It will help keep their attention. Okay, number 4, assume people don't remember all that much. This is terrible, but you may have seen this research too. Research shows that retention is very low. If they only remember one thing, make sure it is the right one thing. Okay, that means being crystal clear about in your message, your one big idea and weaving it throughout the entire message, right? Please do not give them 3 points in a poem. If you really want transformation, give them one truth that they cannot forget. This has probably always been true. Because there's brain science in this. I would argue that in today's world, with as much distraction as we live with, as challenging, and I know that attention spans, there's all sorts of good debate on this, but we live in a world where TikTok and short videos and quick sound bites, we are drawn to those things. And we're drawn to them because of our brain. Brain science shows us this. So if you've got 3 points, people are probably not going to remember all 3. They might not remember any of the 3. Give them one big idea. That's a huge thing that we can assume and change. All right, number 5, assume people need to feel before they will act. Okay, we have to assume that people need to feel that they can do something and feel the benefit or the cost of not doing it before they will choose to do it. Okay, and you know this. Information alone rarely changes lives. Statistics and information are interesting, but they're typically not inspirational. Okay, people are moved by emotion. They need to feel the weight of like sin. They need to feel the hope of grace. They need to feel the urgency of obedience. And stories can do that. Stories that connect to the heart can open the door for the truth to do its transformation work. So assume that people need to feel something, not just hear something. And here's the last important true assumption before you step on the stage. Assume transformation takes time. Okay, this may be the most freeing assumption that you can have. Okay, one sermon doesn't usually change a life. But over time, sermons stack, don't they? Conversations add up, and God is using all of it. So preach faithfully for the long game, not for the quick win. While we're at it, I just thought of one more. Let me give you a bonus assumption, okay? So our 7th one, but here's a bonus assumption. Assume God's Spirit does the real work too. This might be a game changer for you. You're called to be a faithful messenger, but the Spirit convicts, the Spirit awakens, and the Spirit transforms. So preach as if it depends on you, but you can rest knowing that the results really don't. So here's your takeaway from this conversation. Stop preaching to the imaginary audience in your head with the false assumptions that you may be walking in with, and instead start preaching to the real people who are in front of you, the skeptical people, the distracted people, the resistant but hopeful people, and desperately need of God's Spirit. Like when you make these assumptions, when you make the right assumptions, the pressure to manufacture transformation really begins to lift. And you'll end up preaching with a lot more clarity, with more compassion, and with more freedom. Again, just because you're preaching doesn't mean anyone's changing. But if you step on the stage with the right assumptions, you'll create conditions where change really becomes possible. And you'll get to breathe easier, knowing that the Spirit is carrying what it was intended to, the things that you can't.